Robert J. McMahon, The Cold War, A Very Short Introduction. Dive into the complex world of the Cold War with this summary of The Cold War, A Very Short Introduction by Robert J. McMahon. As we explore the seemingly insurmountable divides between capitalist and communist powers, we'll touch on key themes such as the aftermath of World War II, the establishment of new post-war international orders, and the dramatic power struggles that ensued as nations vied for superiority. This engaging look at a fascinating historical period is perfect for those seeking to understand the intricate factors and strategies at play in one of the most critical conflicts of the 20th century.
The Cold War, a product of World War II. World War II left much of Europe and Asia in ruins, with millions dead and cities destroyed. The war also changed the international order, replacing Western European nations with the United States and the Soviet Union. Tensions and hostilities between the US and the Soviet Union existed before and during the war, with the US and its allies wanting to contain the spread of Soviet communism. Though the two nations were allies against Nazi Germany, their relationship was tense, and they couldn't agree on how to fight the war. This led to a power vacuum after the war, which created an environment for the Cold War to begin. The U.S. post-war agenda. After the Second World War, what kind of international order would emerge? The Soviet Union and the United States agreed on the need for international stability, but they disagreed on how to achieve it. The U.S. sought a Eurasian balance of power, a global sphere of influence, and superior military strength. To maintain a favorable balance of power in Eurasia, the United States had to prevent any other nation or alliance of nations from dominating it. With its combination of abundant natural resources, industrial infrastructure, skilled labor, and military facilities, this region was the most strategically important in the world. To counter long-distance attacks, the American strategists aimed to create a global network of U.S.-controlled air and naval bases. To achieve this, the U.S. needed to maintain superior military strength. The interdependence of U.S. military and economic power. In order to maintain global military dominance after World War II, American strategists believed that the U.S. needed to achieve multiple objectives simultaneously. These objectives included maintaining a strong Navy and Air Force, an intimidating military presence in the Pacific, and outright supremacy in the Western Hemisphere. Additionally, the U.S. wanted to play a leading role in the post-war occupation and reconstruction of Axis countries, prevent them from becoming adversaries again, and preserve its monopoly on nuclear weapons. However, to complement its global military power, the U.S. sought to establish multilateral economic relationships based on free trade with the goal of creating a more prosperous, peaceful, and stable world. Striving for common prosperity under capitalism was also seen as a means of keeping communist ideology at bay and discouraging any resistance or threats to the U.S.-led order. The combination of unrivaled military power and common capitalistic prosperity were viewed as intertwined objectives to maintain global dominance after World War II. The U.S. and Soviet Union's visions for post-war Europe. In the aftermath of World War II, the U.S. and the Soviet Union had conflicting visions for the future of Europe. The U.S. aimed to establish a global order with economic agreements, military bases, and allies, while the Soviet Union sought to protect itself by creating a buffer zone and weakening Germany. The Soviet Union, having suffered huge losses during the war, wanted to prevent any future invasions by promoting communism in Eastern European countries, creating a conflict with the U.S. This led to the Cold War, marking a pivotal point in world history. The birth of the Cold War. Disagreements over Germany during post-World War II set the stage for the Cold War in Europe. American strategists viewed Germany as a key player in their vision for the post-war international order, leading to the implementation of the Marshall Plan and the creation of NATO. However, the Soviet Union feared Germany's resurgence and aimed for political control over Eastern Europe. As a result, the US and Soviet Union became increasingly hostile towards each other, with a so-called Iron Curtain dividing the continent and defining the start of the Cold War. The Cold War spreads. As the US and Soviet Union faced their fears of post-war objectives being in jeopardy, communist movements around Southeast Asia became another arena of the Cold War. With the triumph of the Chinese Communist movement in mainland China and the Korean War, the threat of communism expanded. The US feared the region would fall into the orbit of the Soviet Union and China, so it sent aid to US-aligned regimes in Southeast Asia. These complicated events ultimately led the US to be involved in a bloody conflict in Korea and Vietnam. Cold War in the Third World. The Cold War was fought over the Third World, which comprised most of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, as the US and Soviet Union vied for their allegiance through political, economic, militaristic, and clandestine interventions. Southeast Asia was critical as its communist alignment might have jeopardized Japan's trading partnership with the West. Most Cold War conflicts occurred in the Third World. The victors gained economic and military bases, allies, and prestige, while the people of the Third World paid the price, with 19.8 million of the 20 million deaths occurring in the region. The course of the Cold War. The Cold War was primarily fought indirectly in Southeast Asia and the Third World. However, Europe, particularly Germany, was the initial flashpoint and where it ultimately ended. The conflict remained relatively stable in Europe after the 1950s as both sides were unwilling to risk direct conflict due to the devastating consequences of mutually assured destruction. The arms race and the development of nuclear weapons by both sides contributed to this fear. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev's belief that defending against an invasion of Europe was futile led to scaling back the Soviet Union's armed forces, reducing its military presence in Eastern Europe, and loosening its grip on the region. The end of the Cold War saw Germany reunited and the collapse of the Soviet Union.
In conclusion, the Cold War, a very short introduction, encapsulates the intricacies and challenges faced by the US and the Soviet Union during this unprecedented era of global conflict. From the ashes of World War II, two opposing visions of the post-war international order emerged. This inevitably led to political, economic, and military struggles between the capitalist and communist powers. The Cold War was fought primarily in and over the so-called the Third World, which bore the brunt of the deadly consequences. In the end, the fall of the Soviet Union and the reunification of Germany marked the conclusion of this tumultuous period. This summary offers a comprehensive and coherent guide to understanding the key events, themes, and personalities that contributed to this defining moment in modern history.